Most of you will know Feroze for her glamour and her celebrity dam. Wait, her glamour comes from deep affection, empathy, compassion, and simplicity. And her celebrity comes from a lot of hard work. We've had the opportunity of working together now for, I think, 8 months or so, closely on the Satish Gujral centenary exhibition. And I've never known anyone to work as hard as she does. What do you do with all the notes that you take? You take notes all the time. Someone who goes into meetings across the many projects that the Gujral Foundation supports, that the CEPT University project support, etc., and the work that you do in Jalandhar as well with women and children. So that kind of sense of empowerment that you bring is, of course, fantastic. But what we are here to talk about is Satish Gujral, an amazing human being who overcame challenges, his hearing impairment, what it could have done to him if he hadn't overcome them through sheer dint of hard work and personality, and the challenges that he took on his chin, and to figure out what it is that made him so very, very special. And nobody can do it better than Feroze Gujral, who here represents Satish Gujral's family as a very loved daughter-in-law, someone Satish Gujral doted on. So we're going to be talking about Satish
First, I have
with you.
to interrupt.
Yeah.
I love an introduction. I'm like, who's this person? I'm so happy to meet me again. Thank you for the lovely introduction.
Okay. I'm going to flag off this conversation by asking you, Feroze, when did you first hear of Satish Gujral?
That's a good question. I first heard of him at art when I was doing art at school, at boarding school. We had a very enthusiastic art teacher, and we were very well taught, actually. And we heard of Raza Saab, Hussain Saab, Anjali Menon, and Satish Gujral. So he was a familiar name, but I remember still being in school when I heard this scandalous story of him having a party, and at the party somebody, a lady very enthusiastically said, I would love to have a work of your art. So he said, you have to buy it. I don't have any money, I'm a pauper, you have to buy the art. It's my work. And she was very insistent. And finally, by the end of the evening, he said, okay, you offer me something. And she said, I'll do anything. And at that time, the other wickeds in the party said, well, if you strip, you can have the artwork.
Ouch.
So the lady took off all her clothes, sari, petticoat, everything, and a hairpin, climbed the sofa and took the art. So that was the first story I'd ever heard of him and his art when we were very young.
Apocryphal, or did it really happen,
I didn't
Feroze?
expect to be married into the same family.
It was a bit of a shock. And when you came to know him, when was the first time you met him?
Well, wicked father, wicked son. I met Mohit Gujral. He was trying to show me around Delhi. I was 17 years old, and he said, you must meet my best friend and her parents. And I said, lovely. He took me straight home to his parents and his sister. I didn't know they were the parents. And he introduced me to them, and they were absolutely riveting. We went for half an hour. I think we left after dinner. And they were very different. I didn't see them as anyone's parents. They were very strong individuals, very dynamic, very intellectually very powerful, and also very demanding. Like, they didn't ask me, like, where do you live, what do you do? They were like, what do you think? Do you like art? What do you think of India? What would you do if you could change something? I was 17 years old. I was like, none of these things. I want to escape. But they were very unusual as people, and I think that stayed with me. Okay, they were always like that.
You were 17 years old. Feroze, what were you reading at that time?
Oh, Lord. Some dreadful stuff. Chapter 13 of Louis
Wicked
L'Amour or
Daughter-in-Law.
something. All the spicy bits.
Okay, so the book, of course, has a brilliant foreword written by Khushwant Singh, who writes over here, that Satish Gujral is the most outstanding man I have met in my life. What made him so outstanding? What was it that created that personality and that charisma that took him from the countryside in Punjab, from undivided India to the very pinnacles of success, and success that was not simply his own, but also success that he shared with his brother Indira Gujral, who went on to become Prime Minister of the country. So here's a success story. I mean, we've all heard about Manmohan Singh and him rising from the grassroots, etc. But his is an equally powerful story. I'm going to just read out short passages of what happens to him that he talks about when, as an 8-year-old child, he and a group of friends are kind of playing around the Lidda River in Jhelum. I vividly remember my attempt at crossing over to the other side of the Lidda. As I leapt from the first boulder to the next, the boys watching from the bank cheered me. Emboldened by the applause, I jumped onto the next boulder and the next, but on the fourth leap, I missed the flat top of the boulder, was hurled against the side and swept away by the icy swirling waters. It was only after regaining consciousness a few days later that I learned how foolish I had been. He's dragged away by the currents. He's unconscious for a few days. He's then attended to by both Western medicine as well as Indian Veds and Hakims. He's given poultices. He cries in howls in pain, etc. But what also happens is slowly, because his leg has been hurt and the kind of medical treatments he's been receiving, etc., start impacting him.
He was over-anesthetized.
He was over-anesthetized, yes. So he talks about actually losing his hearing. I have a hazy recollection of the fateful day that changed my life. Had I overslept, I did not hear the familiar sounds of the morning, the cawing of crows, chirping of sparrows, the creaking of the hand pump in the courtyard, the chatter of servants, etc. And he goes on to say, my fears were confirmed when I opened my mouth and tried to speak. I could not hear myself. My responses to my mother's questions made no sense to her. She shook me again and shouted with all the strength in her lungs. I could only see her open and shut her mouth with increasing frenzy. Others in the courtyard joined her in yelling what was perhaps my name. I could not hear a word. Feroze, what were your interactions like with him? How did you communicate?
I think the most interesting thing about him was when he was sent to deaf and dumb school, the teacher there was really an angel. She looked at him and felt that if he learned sign language, he would never speak again. Because what happens when you learn sign language is you don't bother to then articulate your vocal cords. So he came back and actually didn't learn sign language. So he was such an inquisitive, curious person that he made his own language. He could lip read. He could read you, working with your fingers. So if I wanted to say cat, I would do this, which is actually a mirror image, right? It's opposite. And he would read every word fast. And if it was a little difficult, we would put it on our hands so he could read it in the right direction. But a lot of times they had devised very comfortably, the family, a language which was a mix of kind of little gestures, things he knew. So I would say, this is my friend. If it was a girl, I would say friend for a nose ring, and then say Kishore. So I would say kiss, Shore. So he would get it, very quickly. Of course, he remembered the women's names and never remembered any man's name anyway. He was most uninterested. He said, no, now forget about him.
He was a woman's man, wasn't he?
All the ladies, yes. And they loved him.
They did indeed.
But it was amazing with grandchildren, with his office staff, with, of course, my mother-in-law. Kiran with the children. He was super fast. There was no gap in our conversation ever, and very curious. And he would lip read at an amazing pace.
Would you also like to share? I mean, he was very erudite and he recited poetry in so many languages, etc. But how did he learn to speak phonetically?
I think he knew Urdu, which was a phonetic language, and his brother Indira Kumar actually used to write to him in Urdu with a translation phonetically in English underneath. He learnt English, Punjabi, and Hindi, wrote them beautifully, including Urdu, had an incredible memory for poetry. Here's the thing. I think when he was very young, his father was a lawyer and in the National Assembly in Lahore. Mother was an activist freedom fighter. So they were very verbose, they were very political. The father was a lawyer. So because he was deaf, he was always to be with one of them. So he grew up with adult books. He didn't grow up with children's tales. There were no children's stories. There were no children's books at that time. So he grew up with all the adult literature. So when I mean adult, I don't mean adult. I just mean like law books and poetry books and regular novels. So his mastery of the language was incredible. You'll see when you read the book, it is incredible. And he would write beautifully. His handwriting, his cursive stroke was beautiful. But that was so also in Urdu, English, and Hindi, and Punjabi. I mean, I can barely speak this language properly. But he spoke four. So it really is perseverance, dedication, focus. He was a master at that.
Okay, so we know he went to train in art at the Mayo School of Arts. Then he went to Sir J.J. School of Art in Bombay, where Gaitonde, India's leading artist, became a friend of his. Both of them were short gentlemen, and perhaps it is a lovely story. So I'm going to read a part of it. Both of them wonder whether they can gain height, and they read an advertisement about some doctor in Ahmedabad who's likely to be able to perform this miracle on them. They managed to get to Ahmedabad, and this is what he writes. As soon as we got to the city, we located the doctor's clinic at one end of a noisy bazaar. We made several rounds of the bazaar till the crowd lessened. And we had summoned up courage to face the doctor, Sahib. To our surprise, he was no taller than us. He had evidently not tried out his intervention on himself. This was very disconcerting, as in the preceding weeks, we had mentally added many inches to our heights and worried about what it would cost us to have new garments made to fit our elevated selves. We left the doctor's clinic very crestfallen and disheartened. So, did that, I mean, because his personality was in so many ways so well-rounded, you didn't actually, even when you had meetings with him, that impairment, other than the fact that you had to speak in a certain way, and Kiran, his wife, was his interpreter in so many ways with visitors or guests, you didn't really place him as someone not in the normal category.
Yes. I think this idea of him not allowing a disability to override his life or his personality or his day-to-dayness is very important. And I find a lot of people now, will come up to you and even say, oh, I'm, mentally disturbed, or I'm anxious, or I'm this and that. And it's very hard for me to be generous, with these kids, because I'm like, this is nothing. You have no idea. But the overriding thing for like an incident like this was that he always had a very, very joyous way. And it startled me because I knew they had come out of the most heinous times with the partition. Lost family members, lost neighbors, seen things no human should see. But they were always, the two sisters and the two brothers, always broke into laughter very quickly. And it took me many years to understand that it was a defense mechanism, because otherwise they would be in tears. So it kind of, if anything was slightly upsetting or disturbing, it was a joke. And they had a lot of Punjabi jokes. So I think that this idea that we have overcome and therefore we can is a very powerful thing. It's about resilience and courage. He was absolutely without fear. Because to him, fear had been dealt with, it had been tasted, had digested, and it had swallowed him whole. So this incredible grit and determination to make everything okay, everything all right, because that is your measure, was something we all had to learn. And it was a good lesson, because nothing faces me now. Not even being on the stage for the first time.
What?
I keep
What
thinking like he's
lies?
going to laugh if I say, oh my God, I'm worried.
No, he always met you with so much warmth. He was
Yes,
so
a lot of
effusive.
energy.
I also have to say, he always, whenever we met, would go into a torrent of Punjabi, and I'm not Punjabi, so despite the Singh surname, so I
You
didn't
look
understand a
Punjabi.
single word of what he said. But I think emotionally what he was communicating came through brilliantly. You talked about partition. So Satish Gujral actually accompanied armed convoys from Pakistan into India. His father remained behind for a period of 8 months in Pakistan. He was a legislator in the assembly in Lahore, and asked his son to help with the movement of refugees. Here is what he writes about it. The trips I made with refugee convoys often did not terminate at Wagah, a hamlet that had become the border post between India and Pakistan. Not at Amritsar, which had become the terminal point for depositing refugees. I had to make sorties to Jalandhar, sometimes to drop off the stray girls and children we rescued from the kidnappers, and at other times to seek sorely needed assistance from the newly established East Punjab government, which was camping at Jalandhar. Since my father was a government official, he gave me a letter of authority that enabled me to cross the border easily. We took an armed contingent with us to rescue women, but I escorted them directly from the recovery sites to camps on the Indian side on my own. Now, don't forget, he has an impairment with both his speech and his hearing. Yes, he was a young boy. This way, my father ensured that in case there was any retaliation, at least my life would be saved, if not his. This made me an unwilling witness to the slaughter on the Indian side. The worst among these was the attack on a Muslim girls' hostel in Amritsar. The inmates were stripped and forced to march in a procession through the Hall Bazaar, the town's main market. There, these girls were gang raped and subjected to the most perverse treatment that any sadistic imagination could devise before being murdered. He talks about the apathy with which scenes like this are being witnessed by people there. Someone who'd been impacted so strongly, Feroze, who, of course, was able to seek perhaps a little bit of catharsis for this through his art making, the way he told his story of loss and sorrow and lamentation, etc. But for people who'd suffered this, seen this firsthand, etc., and you're married into this family, what did he talk about partition?
I think partition was his nemesis. Like, he just could really, I mean, we've read it from a book in a very nice setting, and it seems far away. But you know, this is something you don't get to sleep at night. So one of the things is that I asked him once, what can I get you? And he said, sleep, right? Where you can go to sleep and not have this thought, ever. That was the big one. Secondly is, to me, I was totally, I was too young, but at some point, a few years in, I realized it must have been a very special thing for them to have a Muslim daughter-in-law like myself. You know, as a choice, their son's choice, but also their choice, you know, to without, and I have been so spoiled in that house with everything, and I don't mean materially, but just the richness of living in a house of art and artists and politicians and people who have conviction. So I would say a couple of things. One is the partition was, you know, he once asked me about religion. He said, you can practice whatever you want. You know, you're Muslim, you're most welcome to practice anything. And I said, well, we're ritualistic, but we're not really religious. And we are conservative, but we're not conservative, but we're traditional. And he was listening to me quietly, and I said, what about you? What do you all practice? Because we're a mixed house now. And he said, no. After partition, there are no gods. There are just good men and evil men and people, men who look away. And he said, the worst are the ones who look away. So that was one. The second thing was India, what India meant to them. They crossed that border not for a place, not for finding home, not for settling. They crossed the border for the ideology. So India was their faith. It's a very big thing. It is, and they're all like that, the whole family. They're very dharti se juda, you know. This earth means something. And it's not a place, and it's not a name, and it's not a country. Right? It's an ideology in your head. That this is where I'm going. This will save me. This is who I will become. An Indian. It was a word they didn't know. So that's the second thing. And the third thing, which was very interesting, is that over time, their generosity, in spite of all the adversity, was outstanding to anybody. Right? They never talked about religion. They never talked about, he's Punjabi, he's this, he's that. So it was a far greater an elevation of your spiritual being to say, this will not happen again, I will not watch this again, and to also, in his art, actually show it. He used to say art is life and life is art. So what I paint is what I see or what I felt. So this idea of the Partition series, which I hope you all get to see in Delhi at some point, is really his most important work. It never sold. It was dark. He needed the money. There was no money. They spent many years, 4 of them in a tiny room, one little room. But he could not help himself. And over time I asked, like, why did you paint this, or did you need to, or why, you know? And he says, I could not help myself. And that became really the true mark of being an artist or a writer or anybody. No matter how good or bad your work is, you just cannot do anything else.
I mean, he was the greatest chronicler of partition in ways that I think historians have not been. I think a visual story communicates so much more and so impactfully. I first, of course, met Gujral Saab in the 80s and continued to meet him sporadically over the years for interviews, for simply coming to chat with him, to understand aspects of art making, but also about his art, etc. I have to say, perhaps when one was younger, one was more callow, etc., so one really didn't talk in depth about partition. But towards the last few years, every single time I found myself speaking about partition, and every single time he would become very emotional and break into tears. He never was able to exorcise those demons.
I think also what kicks in, you know, you're talking about perhaps when he was close to 90, he passed away at 95, incredible memory till the very end. And what happens perhaps is your long-term memory kicks in and your short-term memory gets, because he met me once and he said, you must marry my son, he's a very nice man. And I was like, been married to him for 40 years. I don't know if he's such a nice man. But I had to say, of course, I will marry him. So he would have these little lapses, you know, where he would know you, but he would lapse in terms of time, you know. So I think a lot of it, he started going back a lot. Yeah. And definitely it would bother him extremely.
Okay, so he starts work on his Partition series. He's located in Shimla at that point in time. A Hungarian emigre art historian, Charles Fabry, sees his work, calls him a genius, suggests that he apply for a scholarship to Mexico. The Mexican government is offering a scholarship to an Indian artist to go and study or train in art for the first ever time. Gujral Saab applies. But the interesting thing is now he's still not very confident of his spoken language skills in English. He's up against other artists, including Ram Kumar, who are part of those who've been selected for the final interview, etc. He meets through a friend, a stenographer, who says, I will tell you, a stenographer works in the Mexican embassy, who says, I'll tell you how to follow this through, what to do, who you should go and speak with. There's a gentleman who will be there as part of the selection process from the Mexican side. This gentleman is Octavio Paz, who is at that time a junior diplomat in the Mexican embassy. Of course, he will come back as the ambassador later. and go on to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. But the stenographer coaches him, saying, when you walk into the room, there will be this gentleman sitting to your right, etc., over there. Speak directly to him. This is what Satish Gujral writes. As I took my seat before the interview board, my eyes rested on a gentleman seated across from me in the center of the group. He had high cheekbones and slanting eyes. Throughout the question and answer session, I kept my gaze fixed on him. After the interview, we met our stenographer friend near the grill that divides the secretariat blocks from the Rashtrapati Bhavan. He told us that my performance had not impressed the board. The diplomat had not attended the meeting. The man I had took to be him was in fact the Joint Secretary, M.G. Siaden. So he goes on to actually become a friend of Octavio Paz. They become close acquaintances, etc. We know the Gujral family, and Satish Gujral in particular, has friends from all over the world. How did he attract this talent? How did these people come to the home? Who did you meet personally?
I think I'm just going to go back to a little bit about Mexico. So imagine this. Imagine today leaving home on a boat for 3 months, $5, you're deaf, you've never left India, you don't know where you're going, 3 months to a country you've never seen, you have no friends, you have a letter, and you take off because you've got a scholarship. We can't get from the cafe to this hall without asking somebody or having a GPS or something, right? So this kind of spirit, this idea that I can do it and I'm going to do it, is only when you have nothing. This no fear and nothing to lose, right? So his adventures were like that. He was like that with people all the time. An incredible memory. So we have a note from 1953 in one of his diaries, and it lists friends for a card. He wants to send a Christmas card or some card. There's New Zealand, there's Austria, there's Hamburg, there's Tokyo, there's Paris, London, Mexico, there's LA, there's Cincinnati, there are like 16 countries and about 30 cities, and you're in 1953. No internet, no phone, no email, no nothing, nobody to call. How many of us do that now? Right? So it's also a personality type. He loved people. He wanted to know more. He would pay attention. He would remember everything. And years later, we would have guests coming from all over the world who had met him once, who had his art, who had a photograph with him, who got a card from him, something. And they all came at him with total love and devotion, which was surprising.
Yes, so when he's in Mexico, he actually meets Frida Kahlo. The last 6 months of her life, they become close friends. They become close friends. She sends him baskets of fruit and things to eat, etc., probably nurturing the little boy from India. But
they had a shared history of pain because they were both in
surgeries.
Terrible pain at that time. He had his surgeries for his leg and she had her back. And he was working on a mural for Diego Rivera, taught by Siqueiro and Tamayo. These are the greats. These are the 5 great South American masters. So he had the luck of living with them for 2 years and being very close to them. And I think it impacted a lot of his practice. His stroke comes from Mexico, of all his paintings. His life and this idea of, again, persevering, because she was very much one of his great muses in his head was Frida Kahlo.
Frida Kahlo, yes, truly inspires him. But he comes back to India, and he's now trying to create a career for himself in the world of art. And the Delhi art world he writes about has changed completely in the 2 years that he was away in Mexico and New York and Paris, London, etc. That's right, he spends an additional year in New York. But by the time he comes back, the art scene has changed. Bharda Ukil is very much a very strong, powerful figure in the world of art. I'm going to read a short passage on Bharda Ukil and Amrita Shergill and Charles Fabry, because I think there's a sense of joie de vivre that he brings into the book that is a very, very important part of, I think, his personality also. Bharda Okil headed the All India Fine Arts and Crafts Society that he had set up in New Delhi. Bharda Okil cut a Romanesque figure. He was more than 6 feet and 2 inches tall with a muscular frame. He exuded an air of self-esteem. He was always chewing something or the other. This probably gave him an appetite for people as well. He did both with equal gusto. Nobody was sure of how successful he was with women, except that he made himself out to be irresistible to the opposite sex. Amongst the many conquests he claimed was Amrita Shergill. Though a married man with children, he has spread the story that Amrita Shergill had agreed to become his second wife. Amrita was no longer there to contradict him. So there's a confrontation that takes place between Bharda Okil and Charles Fabry. And Satish Gujral is somewhere in the crosshairs of this confrontation because he's been asked to paint a portrait of Lala Lajpat Rai for Parliament House. I was not fully aware of the hostilities between Bharda and Charles Fabry when, accompanied by Indira, I went to call on Bharda. He held court in the circular annex of Jaipur House, which later became a part of the National Gallery of Modern Art. Now, he goes on to write here. Instead of waiting till Fabry left, I asked Bharda for instructions he wanted to give me regarding the portrait of Lajpat Rai. Bharda raised his hands like Caesar, giving a command and said, "Paint it in Amrita Shergill style." I was bewildered and looked towards Charles Fabry. He did not wait for my response. With a spiteful look on his face, he spat out at Bharda, "Why tell him to paint in the Amrita Shergill style? You thought nothing of her when she was alive." This was more than Bharda could take. He yelled back in rage, "You Firangi, how dare you say I hated her? The whole world knows we loved each other." Bharda turned to Indira with an expression of injured innocence. "Amrita, in love with you?" Fabry retorted sardonically, "She hardly ever acknowledged your existence." Fabry got up to leave, but Bharda had not finished with him. He came around the table and held Fabry by his shoulders and shouted, "You say I did not know her. I say you did not know her. Remember, she and I had come to Lahore together. We stayed in Faletti's hotel. We registered ourselves as Mr. and Mrs. Ukil. We came to see me and I introduced you to her. I also remember you borrowed 2 cigarettes from me while leaving. You came back the next day to return them. You're an ungrateful beggar." I mean, did you hear a lot of stories of this kind around the art world?
Yes.
Some gossip?
I think when I look back now, a lot of people who I just took for granted, they were just guests or friends or whatever, is really very much the pantheon of the art world, dancers, writers, great poets, and just not from India, from across the world. Everybody from Faiz Ahmad Faiz, Iqbal Saab, other poets and, singers, dancers, but also international people. We met the Murdochs at home, we met Jacqueline Onassis at home, Madonna, the Beatles, you think of anybody. So, at that time, you don't realize that they're just somebody's friends. We're young, their parents' friends. Now you look back and you see this incredible world of people that influence each other. And very often he used to say to me, I would go to college, come back, and he didn't like me hanging around, like at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So he made sure I went and studied and worked with Rajiv Sethi, with O.P. Jain, with Mapu, with Manjeet Bawa. He would insist that I leave to be with somebody creative. He said, you cannot, the more you spend time with the artist, the better your life is going to be. And it wasn't just anybody, it was only the artist. Someone who's creating, who will help you think. And in thinking, you find solution, and in solution, you find resolution. So he was very forceful as a personality, and all his friends were dynamic people. There was some very beautiful women who didn't say much, but the rest were all like really, very stellar, kind of successful people. He kind of, his reading of people was fantastic. I think the silence helped edit. So he didn't hear all the nonsense and all the rubbish conversation most people have at a party. He would study somebody and come across with very astute deduction of how they are. And that was always entertaining.
You know, there's lots of passages I would like to read, but we're going to be running out of time. So there's just one thing that I do want to kind of conclude the book section with, which is, he talks, and you talked about, you know, women being in love with him, and he was in thrall of Uma Vasudev when he meets Kiran, who goes on to become his wife, and she is simply the most stunning woman ever alive, I think. And you were a daughter-in-law in that family. What was their relationship? Kiran and Satish Gujral, they were so special.
She was from a very wealthy, good family and a student of art, a ceramist. And she met him at an exhibition. He saw her and he went back and told his brother, I found the woman I'm going to marry. She was 19 or 20 years old and he was 34. So there's a big gap. He's now balding, he's short, he's an artist, he has no money, he can't hear. Those are just a few problems. But he was so determined that he won her over, and she was absolutely devoted to him for her entire life. I would say, like in the movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, she was the neck and he was the head. But also being an artist, she was very, very good for him. They were a very good team. So her, you know, creativity, her charm, her grace, her having a lot of style, a lot of knowledge about textile, jewelry, craft, art, a lot of intrinsic knowledge about craft, were a perfect match. Two very dynamic people, obsessed with themselves, obsessed with work, obsessed with their art. I never felt I had in-laws. I don't think they noticed me. I would turn up if I would see like snacks go. I mean, somebody's coming, so I'd follow the snacks. But they always looked mildly surprised that I was still there. Which was nice. It was nice to have working parents in the house. Taught us, we all work, as you said. We all work hard.
Yeah. And it was a privilege to know them both. So really, really beautiful people.
That it was.
I am now going to open this. We have a very short period of time left to questions in the audience. If there are any questions at all, happy to take them at this time. We have 3.5 minutes. Nobody? Ah.
Is there a mic?
Tell us about Satish's political leanings. Was he a leftist by nature? Because if he was a contemporary Iqbal and Faiz, they were all leftists. But his brother turned out to be...
This was, yes, an extremely political household. His brother being a member of parliament, minister, ambassador, prime minister for a short period. Politics and art are very closely intertwined. And that was also a very dynamic thing in the house. Every conversation at dinner was about the news, about your opinion, about ideology, about integrity. That was a big issue on the dining table. If you had to fight for something, you had to really fight. We were not allowed to leave the dining table. Some dinners are 4 hours long because we're still fighting. But that is an incredible, they held it sacred, that what happens to this land is important. How we vote is important. We were not allowed to miss voting day, right? Even though we were kids, like the moment we were 18, you could not do anything. You had to make voting day. He would ask me, do you know what the emergency means? Do you know what, the Delhi riots meant? Do you know what the Mandal Commission means? So this, a lot of his art is beautiful to look at maybe, but it's politically motivated. There are a whole lot of sculptures that are called the burnt woods. Very beautiful, three-dimensional sculptural things. But he started burning these sculptures when the Delhi riots happened. And all of Delhi was burning. And to him, that was it. He had to burn his sculpture to say that, what is this? We have to react. He wrote a lot of very strong political commentaries and articles. There was always a great tussle between his brother, who was trying to be diplomatic or trying to be politically correct, and the artist. But, it was definitely a very, he was very righteous And it was hard to argue with him, but I think he believed in some sort of goodness of humanity, and the outcome should be there if we fight. So the fight was always alive and ticking.
We can see a hand there.
I don't know. Okay.
This is just a short philological question about Charles Fabry. I haven't read the book, but I'll definitely look up the parts and definitely read it. Did Charles Fabry ever write about Gujral's work?
Yes, there are very important documents. He wrote the writing for exhibitions, for his catalogs. He wrote a lot in the press. He also wrote a very good critique of his work, and still remains one of the most important art critics in the 50s and the 60s for India. I mean, he actually chose the 5 or 7 big names that we have today in modernism was his critique.
Thank you.
He was the art critic for the Statesman at that point in time.
I know.
And actually also wrote the recommendation letter for his Mexican scholarship.
Thank you, because I think very few people remember Charles Fabry now. And he also wrote a book about Amrita Shergill,
That's right.
the pink flamingo. Thank you.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, do we take a last question?
Can we do the last one?
Just one last one. All right.
No, so Mr. Gujral's art apart, but how did he stumble, or was it by design, or it was an accident or well thought out thing when he got into architecture and he designed nothing less than the Belgian embassy.
Yes.
And later, what did he think about his own, his own house is also designed by him, I guess. But what was the story behind this and what happened?
A couple of things. That's a very good question. He first met, came in touch with muralism in Mexico. He was working with Diego Rivera on a very large Mexican mural. And the Mexicans, the South Americans were very big on having their, political commentary in muralism on their walls. And he came back to India, to Nehru's New India, and Nehru met him and was very taken up by this man and offered him to make the murals on all the national buildings. So if you go around India Gate, all the buildings have Satish Gujral murals. Baroda House is the big peacock. The High Court is a 40-foot, very large murals. Shastri Bhavan, Vigyan Bhavan, all the bhavans have Satish Gujral murals, which is very rare that an artist was given, facades of huge buildings. A lot of murals through Punjab, a lot of murals in Calcutta, across India. Restaurants, hotels, the Oberoi Hotel used to have a beautiful one. So he started doing murals. His wife was a ceramist, so the murals were made with ceramics. So it was like a new palette and a new canvas to look at very large buildings. But the moment he looked at the buildings, he felt the buildings were faulty. He didn't like the buildings. So he was like, this is rubbish, I don't like this building. Like, it should be a better building for this. But then he realized that architecture is living sculpture. It is three-dimensional, it is sculptural, it has use, and it holds the human mind. To him, this idea that the human has to live or suffer in this dreadful building was a big deal. So he was very caustic about the buildings, and he finally, pushed Mohit Gujral, who was then doing other things, into becoming the architect. The very reluctant son became the architect, and opened an architecture studio so Satish could design the buildings. And we have Didier here, our Belgian ambassador, who's very happy in the Belgian residence. It's a beautiful building. It's also one of the 1,000 best buildings of the last century. So you're a lucky man. So it was a natural evolution from his art sculpture, and then the scale of sculpture changed to building.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
HarperCollins. Copies of the book are available at their stall. And of course, we would urge you to come and see the Satish Gujral Centennial Exhibition, which is on view till the 30th of March at the National Gallery of Modern Art. Feroze, thank you for this extremely charming conversation.